So I want to welcome you to another edition of Life Stories. And today we've got a special guest, as all my guests are special. But I've got Dr. Adigwe, who is not just a medical doctor, but she's also a fashion designer and has her own label. And so we're going to go for her journey, understand how she's combining family life, professional life, and also her aspiring fashion range. So I'm waiting for her to come on in, and we'll start Life Stories. Yeah, I know. As I said, this is Life Stories. I mean, what we've been doing over the past couple of months is really talking to a variety of people from around the world, just getting a sense of their story. Every story is unique, every story is different, but it's also the elements of a story that inspires others. And so for today, for your side is your story as a medical doctor, as a fashion entrepreneur, as a mother, as a wife. There's a sort of mixture of things, and then also we're living in times where there's been an awakening of the racism within society. Some of us will feel it more than others based on the type of work that we do. So there's quite a little bit to explore. But I guess we always start off with from the beginning. Is that people always want to know where you're from, where were you sort of born and raised.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, both my parents are Nigerian. I think they came here in the early 70s, early to mid 70s. They had four kids, and we were basically raised here. But then we moved to Nigeria to do our secondary education, and there we got to learn a little bit more of the culture, learn to speak the language as best we could. And then we came back here, to do my A-levels and then to do university. My dad never stayed here for long.
Okay, no, so I think just catching that, what do you think, what difference did it make doing your sort of secondary education in Nigeria? What did you notice about adjusting to that after growing up and raised here and going there? How was that transition?
It was very hard, very, very hard. It's a completely different system of education. It's a completely different system in the way that they do everything. And having to adjust. I mean, I was about 10 and a half, and having to adjust to that without any kind of like forewarning, proper forewarning was quite difficult. When I talk to my brothers and sisters about that, we often joke that we were there for 6 years, and those 6 years seemed to sort of like drag on. They were really slowly paced. But then when we came back here and we stayed here for 6 years, it just flew by quickly. Obviously, I think there were good things that I got out of it. My dad has a huge family out there, and it was nice to get to know them. It was lovely to get to know and know our culture and understand the language, which is something that I think is incredibly important and something that I'm trying to pass on to our kids. It was definitely a big eye-opener. It definitely made me appreciate a lot of what I have, and a lot of the privileges that I've got from my parents, being who they are. It was definitely a big eye-opener. Some positives and a few negatives, but it's definitely been paved the way to me becoming who I am today.
Okay. And you were mentioning that your dad didn't spend as much time here, so having and I'm understanding that he probably had business interests back at home and stuff, and weather and stuff. How was that, having that sort of split family sort of situation?
I think when we were very, very young, my parents, my mother especially, she didn't really, I think she shielded us from a lot. She didn't really explain so much to us. It's only when I think I was in secondary school, I remember my dad saying to us that or, you know, it was very, very tough back then. There was a lot of racism here in England. And, you know, even though he worked very hard and he graduated top of his class here in England, for instance, he couldn't get a job. You know, his other peers, most of them white, did get jobs and he couldn't. So he had to move to Nigeria because of that. And the way they told it, I think they downplayed it a bit, and we didn't really think about the impact of that. And the funny thing is that now, with everything that's happened in the last few months and the awakening that's happened in the last few months, we've revisited that and we've looked at it and we thought, no, hang on a second, it was actually quite meaningful. It was actually the impact it had on us was quite significant, because at the end of the day, we grew up without our father being present all the time, and because of racism, basically. So it's definitely, the last few months has definitely, you know, brought about conversations that we never would have had, probably never would have had otherwise, which has been really important for us. So he moved back to Nigeria when I was about 3 or 4, and then he would come back maybe once a year or every 2 years and visit and stay for maybe a month or so, and then head back there. And then we would go back every few years just to visit him and then come back here. And it's only until it was time to go to secondary school that we actually moved there and stayed with him for 6 years. And then we came back here. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and then we'll touch on the Black Lives Matter and the impact it's had, greater impact it's had on you a little later. Yeah. So you coming back here and A levels and university, did you find it that you had an advantage coming from the Nigerian system, or was it much of a disadvantage having to relearn the system here?
Oh, a huge advantage. I mean, because the education system there, unless it's tough, but it is advanced. You know, when I came back here, because I did my Cambridge O levels out there and then came back here to do my A levels, I remember sitting in the class and the teachers were looking at me like, where are you from? How do you know all this stuff? And I was like, we've already studied this, we've already done all of this. And, you know, so I found my A levels incredibly easy, which was nice. So those 2 years was really, really nice for me anyway. So even though, like I said, the education system there, it's tough in a way, it definitely prepared me for doing my A levels and then subsequently passing all my exams and then heading to medical school. So yeah.
Okay. And why did you choose medicine?
I've got Nigerian parents. No. I remember, you know what, people ask me that, yeah, and I remember when I was a little girl, my mum bought me this medical kit with the stethoscope and everything, and she said to me, you know, my mum's a nurse, so she said to me, Adi, you're going to be a doctor, aren't you? And I was like, yes, mummy, I'm really eager to please, you know, yes, mummy, I am going to be a doctor. And then I moved to Nigeria and I saw how the healthcare system there was and how it was tough being a student. I remember that period of time in Nigeria, I thought to myself, no, I couldn't be a doctor, I couldn't do this, you know. And then I came back here and I did some work experience because my mum's a nurse. She got me some work experience in a GP practice. I got some work experience elsewhere as well. And I looked at it and I thought, nah, this is definitely what I want to do. You know, I'm the kind of person I think I crave on trying to make other people, making a difference and trying to make other people's lives better in however small or bigger way that I can. And I think just the profession I'm in suited that perfectly.
Okay. And so did you then find medical school here, I won't say as easy, but a little bit more straightforward compared to after your experience in Nigeria, or was that an eye-opener?
Yeah. A lot straightforward because there was a lot of structure to it. There wasn't the threat of constant strikes that people back in Nigeria have to face, you know? They do everything that they can to help you pass those exams and succeed and to put the practical aspects into the theoretical aspects of studying as well. So I didn't find medical school difficult, you know, and yeah, I got to meet lots and lots of fantastic people along the way that I'm still friends with today. So it was definitely a wonderful experience. Yeah.
Was it as diverse as it seems like now? Sort of the students that when you started off with a mixture, black and white, Asians, or what was it like back in those days?
No, back in those days, I mean, we're talking about, when did I go to medical school? In the year 2000. I went to Royal Free and University College in London Medical School, and no, not at all. I mean, I think we were about 400 in the year, and in terms of that number, I think we were about maybe under 10 Black people in the year, which is quite very low, very low. I don't know what the figures are like now. To be honest with you, I haven't looked into it, but I do hope they have improved, because back then it was pretty dire.
But how was it then being, one of 10 Black people in a school? Did you feel it, or were you so driven by what you were doing that you didn't notice? What was it like?
I think I on the grand scheme of things, I didn't notice, but there were obviously the students there and my colleagues there, and they were fantastic. And like I said, I've made lifelong friends there. So from that point of view, I didn't notice. From the point of view of my tutors, I didn't notice. I did notice there was one occasion, for instance, when I was I think I was about in probably my 5th year in medical school. We had a meeting where they brought patients in, and then we had to talk to the patient. I can't remember for the life of me what we had to talk to this patient about. And then in a group, they divided us into groups. So I think I was in a group of maybe about 10, and I was the only Black person in that group. So after we asked the patient questions and listened to what he had to say, he then turned to me and said something along the lines of, why is it that all these African countries keep having problems? Why can't their countries feed them? Why do they have to keep coming here? And I remember being taken aback by that. And I remember thinking to myself, no, I'm not going to stand for this. And then I did talk back to him and say, what you've said was completely inappropriate. Out of all of us here, you've turned to me to direct that question, and it's got nothing to do with why we're here today. And then the tutor afterwards heard about what happened. He was really, really good. He called me aside, and I think he was Italian or Spanish, and told me about just a little bit snippet about the difficulties he's had coming over to this country and having to adapt as well. And he was really good. It was really nice of him to sort of debrief and help me take a step back and recognize that. I think a majority of my colleagues in that group understood and weren't happy, but I was definitely taken aback by one or two who said to me afterwards that they thought that I overreacted when he said that. And I made them realize that, no, that is not an overreaction. What he said was completely inappropriate. And in fact, my stance on it was an underreaction, looking back on it today. So that was that. I think that was the only negative experience. So out of 6 years, that was the only negative experience I've had, which compared to other people, it's not huge, My only other experience was not in medical school. It was not whilst I was in medical school. It was coming home from medical school, where I think it was my first proper experience of having someone racially attack me. And I think that was when I was about 18 or 19. So I'd first come into medical school, and I was going home on the tube. So I got into the lift at one of the tube stations in central London, and then this white man, probably in his 40s, he had his hands in his pockets, and he looked at me and he started mumbling something, and I couldn't hear what he was saying. So I said to him, excuse me, and then he started mumbling it a bit louder, and I still couldn't hear what he was saying, but the look he gave me was not right. So I stepped back, and so then I went onto the platform, walked to the other end, sat on a bench. There was a white woman beside me, and then just ignored him. We went to the other side of the platform, started mumbling something to people there. They walked away from him, and then he came back to me, stood right in front of me with his hands in his pockets, and he started yelling at me how he hates all Black people and all Black people should go back to Africa, how his boss was Black and he hated his boss. And at that moment, I froze. He was ranting on and on and on. And when I retell this story, I forget everything that he says, because I remember at that point, I just couldn't think, And in that moment, I remember thinking, the only thing I could think was that he has his hands in his pockets. I don't know what he has.
Yeah.
And the thought of Stephen Lawrence was just running through my mind. I just thought, I just better keep quiet. I just better ignore this. Yeah. But then it was the white woman. who was sitting next to me, who came to my defense. And I could never remember, obviously I didn't really talk to her that much, but I remember her shouting at this guy and saying, how rude, how pathetic. And she just kept going on at him, and I don't know what she said, but then he just stood back, he kept quiet, and he sort of like walked away with his tail between his legs. And then I remember what she said to me. She said something along the lines of, don't ever sing to their level, they're pathetic, they're not worth it, And then the train came, and I just got onto the tube, and then that was it. And looking back on that, it never really impacted on me, because I think my experiences of racism have been relatively small compared to other people. But it definitely, one of the things that I thought about was that it's definitely not about, white versus black. It's definitely about, races versus anti-races. It was this white woman that came to my aid and, defended me, when I couldn't even defend myself. And I've always thought to myself, I would never be in that position again where I would face any kind of racism or racist attack or whatever and not defend myself again, or not stand up for myself. And I've never, ever allowed that to happen. Never.
Oh. I mean, did you relay this story to the family and people at the time, or what did you do?
No, I think about it and I think, why? I didn't tell my mum. I went home and I didn't really tell my mum, maybe because I didn't want to worry her, or I didn't want her. I think she was always a little bit nervous about me taking the tube,
Okay.
And I didn't tell my mum, I didn't tell my dad about it. I just kept it to myself. And it was one of those things that I just never really allowed to impact on me in any way, shape or form, I just decided that he wasn't worth it. People like that are just not worth it. And I just continued with everyday life. I can't remember if I really discussed it. I mean, even in the wake of the last few months, I can't remember if I did discuss it with my siblings or not. But no, I just kept it to myself and just moved on, really. And just thought to myself, I would never let that kind of racism affect me in any way, shape or form.
Now, I guess looking back then, if there are two ways. Yeah, one, you could have, you could. I think if it happens nowadays, there is there's the law which is protection, which could protect, and he would have been arrested. But the one thing you mentioned is hands were in his pockets, train station. Yeah. It could have turned violent, especially it's very people are racist, but to verbally come out in public and do that, it takes a degree of courage, almost a degree of fearlessness to do that. I mean, people are very closet racist, so I probably I probably would have been much more as guarded as well, not trying to. Not knowing that what's he trying to provoke, what's the bigger picture? Is he waiting for me to attack and bring out a knife, self-defense and things like that? But I guess I'm wondering though, did that experience make you stronger, or did it make you bitter? Were you always observant about watching everything anyone says? Because you mentioned about the patient. Was this playing in your mind when the patient talked about Africa? Did you think about this guy?
I think with those two instances, I think the one that probably impacted me more was the patient, okay? Because I don't know, I think I had to sort of speak up myself, and the fact that some of my colleagues took what I said as an overreaction, that was hurtful at that time. But again, I just didn't let that impact on me. The racists at the train station, I didn't let that impact on me at all, not even in the slightest. It was one of those things. It was one of those things that I've always heard about it. I always knew that obviously that racism existed, but it was the first time that I'd ever experienced anything like that. And I think my parents, especially my mother, always taught us to be strong and to not be held back by other people or what other people's opinions are of us, and to push that aside and be who we want to be, that who we are in future is determined by only one person, and that's ourselves, So he was insignificant and still is.
Yeah, no. So, well, I think one of the questions I wanted to find out, and I did ask about what your experience going to secondary school in Nigeria had on you. I went to secondary school in Nigeria, had my primary school
Yeah,
here in the UK, went to university in America. But when they were, and I lived in the South in
yeah,
America,
yeah.
and when they were experiencing a lot of
Okay.
their sort of subtle racism
Oh.
and stuff in the South, it didn't affect me because
Mm.
to me it was like, goodness, I could have gone to university in Nigeria, so I saw this as paradise. So I had this a different mentality, and I wondered how much being in Nigeria,
Yeah.
knowing history and roots and culture, that I didn't have the baggage that they have of civil rights and your parents and grandparents. So hence I'm wondering, when you have people
Yeah.
who might have been racist to you
Mm.
over here, it didn't impact you as much because you already knew your
Yeah.
family. You have a very different mentality, and I just wondered if you hadn't gone to Nigeria, would you think it would have impacted you differently?
I'm not sure that going to Nigeria it did or would have. Um, when it comes to racism, I don't think it would have done. I think being in Nigeria has definitely impacted me in other ways. It's made me it's made me realize, how lucky I am, and how fortunate I am to have the things that I do have, and be surrounded by the family that I am. It's made me fortunate to realize that I do have a family out there, and a wonderful family out there, that we have a wonderful history out there. The culture itself is wonderful. It's beautiful, like I'm sure you are fully aware of. But when it comes to racism, obviously I didn't experience, I didn't see it out there, so it wasn't, I think if I had probably been here, had my secondary school education here, I would have been more clued up on racism.
Okay.
I think living in Nigeria and then coming here back here at the age of 16, and then going to university at 18, I think back then, looking back then, I was very, very naive as to the racism that did exist. I remember I had another medical student out there. He was black back then, and he'd obviously grown up in this country. He was Nigerian as well, grown up in this country, never lived in Nigeria. And he seemed to be a lot more clued up on racial issues than I was. And I'd like to say that I learned a lot from him, but didn't really. So I think in a way, I was definitely very, very naive back then. Probably a little bit more in uni than I had been, but then I think I've definitely learned a lot in the years from then, and definitely learned a huge in the last few months.
Okay, okay. So you finished med school, and I take it that you guys have to get a job. They can move you here, there, anywhere. Where were you assigned when you finished?
So I applied for jobs mostly in London, but then I got moved to Kent.
Okay.
So got William Harvey Hospital in Nashville. That was my first placement, and that's where I met my husband, actually, in the hospital. So it was the first time. Yeah, it was the first time I'd moved away from home, because they gave us accommodation at the Harvey Hospital. And so I moved out of home, which was quite emotional. And yeah, I met a lovely bunch of people that had also moved out of home. And a few months into my placement, met Amechi, and we just hit it off, and then we got married a few years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if you go back to, you said moving out was emotional. I mean, most people go to university and move around. But for you, is it a close-knit family, or you just very much dependent on mum and the family? What made it hard to just move less than an hour away?
Both close-knit family, heavily reliant on my mum. My mum is the kind of person that she would want to do absolutely everything for you. So we're very much spoiled in that way. So it was, and also, you know, I'd obviously lived in Nigeria, like I'd mentioned, but then I'd only ever lived in London. I'd never lived anywhere else. So moving to a completely different county and on my own, it was scary. It was, and then obviously leaving education and then taking up a first job at the same time and becoming a doctor for the first time, realizing the kind of responsibility that was placed on my shoulders and what I'd have to be doing as well. So all of that, you know, all of that did make me feel, it was, a lot of it was the fear of the unknown as well. So all of that did make me feel nervous, emotional, unsure, you know, not very confident to begin with. But what greater way to teach you how to be confident than to move out to a different county all by yourself, be thrown into the mix of being a doctor. So yeah, I found my confidence very, very quickly.
You know, there's something that you mentioned that I think a lot of us take for granted, is the fact that when you qualify, whether a doctor, nurse or lawyer stuff, is the fact that you're expected to be able to do something that you've just studied for. And there's a big responsibility that people are looking for you for answers. I remember working in a mental health ward a number of years ago, and if we had issues with a patient, we'll go to our registered, not the registered, these are the first year doctors who are doing placement, and they're supposed to be able to say, okay, you're the doctor, what do we do here? And they're just straight out of uni, and they're like, wow. But you don't, you think, well, you're a doctor, that's it, you should know what's going on. Or when we had somebody who stopped breathing and we're doing a CPR, doctor, what do we do? I said, I don't know. What was it like though? You're saying that initially, did you think, they call it the, is this imposter syndrome? Did you think that you were an imposter? Or what was it like?
I think I didn't feel as well prepared for it. I think it's a huge, obviously it's going to be a huge change. It's a huge change from being in medical school to be thrown onto the ward in the midst of, and I did a surgical rotation, so I guess it wasn't as bad as probably my medical colleagues, but then some, you know, it was very much like that. I remember once, you know, post-surgery, there was a patient coming back onto the ward. He was constantly throwing up. They'd given him antiemetic, anti-sickness medications, and he wasn't, you know, responding to that. So the nurse came up to me and was like, what do we do next? I remember looking at them thinking, well, I don't know, you know? And so then I called my senior and they said, okay, put in a nasal gastric tube. And then I thought, okay, I don't know how to do that. So I just said to the nurse, that would be the next step. But then, of course, you rely heavily on your seniors to support you, and they did that perfectly. They did that brilliantly. I had lovely seniors who supported me really well, and you learn fast. You do learn fast. You learn lots on the job, and yeah, it definitely felt like being thrown in at the deep end. Not very confident to begin with, but then your confidence grows, you know. And I think it's like that with many jobs, you know. But yeah, I look back at a lot of things that happened back then. I sometimes cringe, but other times I just laugh and just thought it's the path that I had to go on to get to where I am today, you know? Yeah, I think because we were placed on, sort of at that point, we were placed on yearly rotations. So I was in Kent for a year, and my next year I was placed back in London. And then having worked in London, I definitely thought I do miss Kent.
Wow.
I'd fallen in love with Kent, and even though I felt like I spent the majority of my life in London, and I remember leaving London thinking, I'm a London girl. What do I know about living outside London? Apart from living in Nigeria, what else do I know? But then after leaving Kent, you know, it wasn't just leaving MH. I didn't completely, obviously we did spend time with each other. But I definitely missed working in Kent. I missed living in Kent. So after that year in London, then I applied to move back to Kent. I moved back to Kent, and I've been in Kent ever since.
Okay. So, and I guess so did you have the option as to what to specialize in? You said you start off with a surgical, but did you then think, what did you decide you wanted to specialize in after your rotation?
Yeah, our first 2 years, you spend a bit of time doing a bit of everything, really. You spend time in surgical rotations, you spend time in medical rotations, spent a bit of time doing GP, spent a bit of time doing A&E, just to get a feel of the different specialities. Spent a bit of time doing psychiatry as well, to get a feel of the different specialities that were out there. And I think after all of that, it came down to two things. It came down to either pediatrics or general practice. And I think what swayed it towards general practice more was that I wanted to be, I didn't like the on-calls, I didn't like the weekend rotations. I wanted to be more in charge and control of that, because I thought to myself that in terms of, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids. And I knew back then that I wanted to have a few kids, and I knew that I would have to be around. I knew I would have to be around, and I think the specialty that fit into that narrative was becoming a general practitioner, which is the avenue I went down.
Okay. So now, as a general practitioner, so if we then visit, okay, there are two parts. It's the balance between being a general practitioner, being a wife, and being a mom. How did you find? How have you found that balance?
I think it's been fantastic in the sense that with big general practice, you can choose the number of sessions you want to work, the number of days you want to work. You don't have to do on-calls if you don't want to do it. So in that sense, the balance the onus has always been on myself. The onus has always been on Mitch to decide how we want it to work. And because Mitch and I come from backgrounds where we work incredibly hard, we've always just been work. And over the years, we've had to learn to step back from that and realize, no, having a good work-life balance is incredibly important for our mental well-being and also for the kids as well. So thankfully, I definitely, worked on him, and he's definitely taken a huge step back. So he was working weekends all the time, and he doesn't do that anymore. He's given that up years ago. And obviously the kids have greatly benefited from that. We've benefited from that as well. So being in general practice has definitely, it's not always easy, but it's definitely been great with how we wanted it to fit into our lifestyle with our kids as well. So yeah, we don't do on calls, unless we absolutely have to. Mitch, obviously he has his own practice, so he has to do more of that now. But because I don't, it means that I can be there to pick up the kids. I'm there to do the homework with them. On the weekends, we're both there to take them to whatever clubs they need to be taken to. We both there to spend time with family and friends with the kids as well. So a lot of my colleagues unfortunately don't have that balance, but we do. And I think there is a long way, we've got a long way to go. I think, in terms of the amount that we do work, compared to the amount of time that we do spend at home, work definitely surpasses that. But we are definitely working at cutting back at work so that we can definitely spend more time with each other, spend more time with kids, spend more time with friends and family, because that time goes by really quickly. It does go by really quickly. I mean, our eldest now, she's 10, so that time has just flown by. And I think one of the reasons, like I said, I suppose chose general practice is because I definitely wanted to be the kind of mother who was around, and so I need to be, it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of discipline to say, okay, no, I'm not going to work this day. I'm going to choose to do this for myself or do this with the kids. And I'm becoming more disciplined as the years go by. I'm becoming more disciplined at doing that. And so is Mitch. And it's been good. Yeah.
So you guys moved to Kent 10, 11 years ago when it wasn't as diverse as it is now. And so we hark back to the experience you had, as an 18-year-old, when you were also in medical school with a patient asking a question. Did you not then feel as if, wow, this is different environments, everyone's staring? Did you feel a change? Did you notice the fact that it's not like London when you moved?
Sorry, I missed that last part. So
when you moved to Kent, did you realize it's not like London? It's not as diverse multiculturally, and it is and actually you're probably one of the very few blacks, and especially professionals, back in the day when you moved. Did you notice that, and was that a challenge at all?
No, I didn't notice that. I wasn't made to feel any different than been made to feel. I don't think that Kent is more racist. Although I agree with you, definitely. Like we moved to Tenterden, and I think I always joke with Mitch that I was the only black person in Tenterden when we moved here years ago, and he was the only mixed race person in Tenterden at the time. But I never felt it in a way that was detrimental in any way. I wouldn't say that even at that Kent is more racist than London. I would perhaps even say it was probably the opposite. But the experiences I've had, with brushes of racism here and there, from patients or what have you, I don't think that it would be any different here than it has been in London. And speaking to my colleagues who obviously work in London, some of the experiences have been definitely more horrific. But so no, I think in terms of living in Kent, yes, there's fewer people from ethnic minority backgrounds, but I wouldn't say that the racism was more at all.
So I mean, but going through that, just before we get to your fashion label, how did then the George Floyd sort of event and just sort of Black Lives Matter sort of awakening come back to sort of, I won't say haunt you, but almost, because it seemed like it did stir up something more so than everyone? It got affected differently, but did you think it affected you any more than you thought it would?
I think, of course it did. And I think there are lots of people the world over. If you watch the news and you see what was happening in America, here, Italy, Spain, Australia, Germany, it was an awakening all over the world. It was a global awakening. And I do reflect on it. I look at it and I think, okay, yes, of course, we know about Stephen Lawrence, we know about Trayvon Martin, we know about all these people that have died because of the color of their skin. And I asked myself, why has this particularly impacted on me more than it ever has? And I don't know, I haven't really found the answer to that, I think I've always been the kind of person where I see injustice happening, I've always wanted to be that kind of person to stand up against that. So obviously, I think in quick succession, we had Ahmaud Arbery, the black man who was killed for jogging, back in February. Then we had Breonna Taylor back in March or April. And then we had George Floyd back, end of April, beginning of May. And so all of this, I think it just made people feel fatigued and made people feel tired. And then people just basically came up and said, enough is enough. We have had enough. We have had enough of all of this. It's time for things to change. Change is long overdue, and we all need to make a stand against this. And I think I wanted to be part of that movement. I wanted to open my eyes. I wanted to see what was happening. I didn't want to, like I said, I was naive back in medical school. To a certain degree, I was naive up until a few months ago when I opened my eyes. And I think it's in terms of the relationships I have with people, it's definitely been a big eye-opener as well. So some relationships I've chosen to continue, some I've chosen not to continue because of it. And I think, like you touched on the fact of, you mentioned closet racism or closet racists. I think it definitely has brought out a lot of people have been more brazen, it's definitely brought out a lot of those closet racists. And it's in a way, I don't see that as a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for people to really say what they're thinking, what they're feeling, so you know what you stand. Sometimes there's been an opportunity to educate people, those who want to be educated. There are some that choose to stay ignorant, and that's on them, I don't see it as my job to educate people on race and racial matters and things like that. I think there are many resources out there that you can pick up and choose
And this whole event, you mentioned that it has actually ended some relationships that you've had. I mean I think a lot of us would find that quite challenging to believe that people that you consider friends and stuff would decide to stop a relationship because they don't agree with the fact that racism exists, or
I think I think it's been very, very few. When you think about the number of friends that I'm fortunate to have, I think the when I say that, I've chosen to end some relationships, I mean it's been a handful, and I take the stance that it's not everyone I consider to be a friend, and it takes me a long time before I build up those relationships and before I consider someone to be a genuine friend. And those people that I do in my life that I do consider to be genuine friends are still there. They're still very much by my side. They're still very much good friends. Others, I think, I can, in terms of acquaintances, let's put it that way, I can argue with anyone about anything. We can disagree about different things, but racism, race, oppression of people because of the color of their skin is not something that I'm going to entertain in any way, shape, or form. And I think when I look back at the relationships that I haven't let go, it hasn't impacted me or my lifestyle or my friends or my relationship, my family or anything, who I am today in any way, shape or form. And it's been, like I said, the last few months, definitely, it's been great to see across the globe, everyone coming together. Blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asian people. When you look at the protests that have been happening, it's not just black people that you see on the protests. You see people from all races coming together to protest together. That was a shocker for me. I didn't expect to see so many people from so many different races coming out and marching for this. And although I knew, the second shocker was that although I knew there was racism in this country, I just didn't understand how much there was. And I think this has definitely been a big eye-opener for me. And so, the relationships that I have let go, I'm at peace with that completely at peace with that. For me, I think I see all the events and everything that I've done in the last couple of months, everything that I've said, everything that I've stood up for as a path of growth, a path to better myself, a path to understand and to be willing to understand and be willing to be part of the movement that says, okay, change has to happen. There are people that are really, really suffering here, that they shouldn't be, where they shouldn't be. And I want to be part of that change. I want to do something. I just don't want to sit back and be silent. I actually want to do something. And I'm happy to be in that zone. I'm happy to be in that space where I can do that. I can say that. I'm happy to be in a place where I think about my kids and I think about their future and the impact this might possibly have on them and prepare them for that, So it's definitely been a huge eye-opener. Positives, there's been some negatives, but the negatives has been seeing the amount of racism that's out there has just it's not easy for anyone to see, but like one of my friends said to me, don't ever let that impact on you. It's when you look at some groups, when you look at some groups that have been set up to just be racist, of course you're going to see those kind of comments. Of course you're going to see those kind of reactions out there. But you've got your path. Follow that path. And stay strong in that path. Stay strong in the light that you're the path that you're going down, and that's what I've decided to do. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good, and I guess it's in some light it's good that there's been a recognition by corporations, institutions across the world that yes, things haven't been great. We've
absolutely,
blacks have been disproportionately unrepresented in the media, in the boardroom, in various places, and that's almost a sense of
yes,
guilt and an eye opener. Like, wow, we hadn't understood what was going on, and we're prepared. And I think broadcasters like Sky who are really putting a lot of energy into changing. I mean, they're changing sports lineups. The BBC, in some sense, they're saying that they're not just investing money, but they're actually making changes from within. And so it's the kinds of steps you need. And I think hopefully I don't want things to be rushed, because if you try and say, let's try and fix it today, it just becomes a little patch and then tomorrow we forget. But I think there's this sense of let's take our time.
Exactly.
Even universities and employees, my trust has been very big
and
about doing it right, getting people to share what we're from hearing from the people and stuff. So hopefully our kids will be in a better position growing up, that there's a recognition that things haven't been right and we're making amends for your generation. Now saying that, now so we
absolutely I completely agree with you.
Yeah, go ahead, continue.
Sorry, there's this lag. No, I completely agree with you. There's been a huge recognition, out there of the fact that we have been marginalized and hugely underrepresented. But what I hope is that things aren't rushed, like you said, and that things are done properly, that this isn't just a show of tokenism, that people actually take on board that, no, there has to be a lasting change here, not just for our generation, but for generations to come. And so I'm happy. I'm obviously not happy with the events that led to this, but I'm happy that we are living in times where hopefully things will change and will lead to lasting change.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we start off talking about you being a sort of doctor, mother, wife, but then I'm also mentioning the fact that you started to also branch into fashion. You were talking about work-life balance as a GP, and then you decided to take on a new creation. What inspired that, and what can you tell us about this?
I think for that, the dress business is more of it started off as more of a hobby, and then it's just grown. It's something that, I'm a woman who doesn't love fashion, who doesn't love, delving in that area. But it started off, I remember back when I got married, I wanted to look for dresses that my bridesmaids could wear and wear time and time again, something that just didn't conform to the norm, something that stood out, beautiful dresses. And I just couldn't find it. And so I had to get it from America. And then leading on from that, I'd always had the niggle that this is something that I liked doing. This is something that I wanted to continue, but I just never had the courage or the guts to do it. And then a few years ago, I remember talking to a few friends, and I remember speaking to one in particular who said to me, well, you know what, just do it. If it fails, it fails, but at least then this has always been niggling at you for the last few years. So just do your research, do it. And that's what I did. So I did my research, spoke to another friend about if she wanted to come on board. So we both joined forces together, and then we launched Better Grace Event Dresses. And I remember in our first 6 months, we sold two dresses in 6 months. And I remember saying to her that I'm not sure what we're doing here, but you know what? We've invested in this. We put so much time and so much effort into this. I'm not prepared to give up now. I've never, I'm not the kind of person to give up on things. So let's just keep persevering and push through this. I remember when the dresses started arriving, Mitch was like, are you sure you're starting a business here, or are you buying these dresses for yourself? I was like, no, this is a genuine business here. We are definitely doing this. And then I think obviously with word of mouth, with a bit more marketing, and it just started to catapult. And it's definitely taken off. Obviously with COVID has affected everything. COVID has definitely impacted on us. We are not doing as much. But then again, I love doing it. I love when people come in, they see our collection, and you see sometimes these little girls, especially the girls who go for prom, you see their faces just completely light up. And then when they find the dress, find the one. And I know it might seem like a little bit trivial, but when they actually stand there and they find the dress, and then they put their head up high, they stand up, and you see the confidence that they feel wearing that dress that they found, and the smile, the happiness. We've had tears. We've had girls just break down in tears, and their mothers break down in tears, and the stories that we've had as well. It's definitely something that I absolutely love doing. And whether we are incredibly busy, or whether it's quiet as it has been in the last few months, it's still something that I'm definitely going to push forward with and continue. Touching on when you said about the work-life balance, yeah, it wasn't the best idea when you're trying to cut back on work and then trying to spend more time with the family. It wasn't the best thing to delve into, starting up a new, completely a business that I've had no experience in, the business world. All I'd done was medical school and then working as a doctor. But then I think looking back on it, I can't help but be proud of myself, be proud of my business partner, be proud of my husband who supported me throughout. There's not one second that he doubted me. There's not one second that he didn't encourage me to do this. He's been, we've got 4 kids. So if I'm there, busy with doing appointments or dealing with customers, he's the one that's there looking after the kids, So there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that I couldn't have done this without him. Absolutely no doubt. So it's made me reevaluate things and then look at my relationship with him and look at the fact that I am incredibly lucky to have someone as supportive and loving as him by my side and encouraging me, pushing me to do better, whether it is with, the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it is my profession as a GP, whether it's the dress business that I'm doing. We've now started a property development business as well, both of us, and we're both encouraging each other to push forward on that. So we both complement each other really well. And I think moving forward, yes, we do need to find a better work-life balance. But the dresses, it's fun. It's fun. It's hard work. Don't get me wrong. It is hard work at times, but it is fun. And we've taken up a new employee, someone that comes in and helps do appointments as well. So over time, over the next year, as COVID dies down, as business picks up, we will take on more employees to help with that side of things, so that I will have more time to have with the kids and things like that. Yeah.
So what do you do? Do you design the dresses or do you source them, or what do you particularly? Do you do?
Oh no, Namdi, I know I'm talented, but I'm not that talented. I don't do designing. I am. We basically, there's so many different designers out there, and suppliers out there. So we source the dresses from them. Okay. They send us their catalogs and we look through, and then we choose the ones that we think will best fit in with our collection. And we work with about 11 different suppliers. And we did start up our own label as well about a year ago. And we don't do most of the designing. We might say that, we'd like this from this dress and that from that dress and try and put it together. But it's still relatively new. Obviously, COVID happened, so we haven't necessarily explored that. There is one dress I'll take credit for. There was one dress, a flower girl dress, that I did design from scratch myself. Okay. And it's on our website. We are selling. That's the only design that I can take credit for. Okay. It's a beautiful dress, if I have to say so myself. Okay. The reaction we got from Facebook with that and on Instagram outlets has been phenomenal. But I think going forward, we might delve into that a little bit more, doing things, our own designs and things like that. But for now, it's most of our dresses come from suppliers. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I guess finally, with especially going into a business like that, and you said you've had the idea for a long time, many people would think about starting up a business or starting off an idea, but they are hindered by practicalities of work and family, and it's like, it's not going to happen. Am I going to invest too much money and it'll fail? What would you say to would-be entrepreneurs who have been sitting on ideas like you had and are struggling to say, let me go forward?
Yeah. Find a way. There's always a way. If you're passionate about something and you truly believe in something, find a way to do it. You don't want to look back in 10 or 20 years time and regret having not done it. If you do it and you put everything into it, and it doesn't succeed, then at least you know that you've tried. But if you never do it, if you never try and find a way, if you don't try and break down barriers, whatever barriers are there, you might wake up one day and regret not having pursued that. So whatever obstacles are in your way, just try and see if you can find a way around it. If it's financial, go and speak to your bank managers. Just don't take no for an answer. Keep pushing through, you know, and then hopefully one day, whether it's that initial business idea or whether it evolves into something else, one day hopefully you will succeed and you'll look back on something that you can be truly proud of.
Oh, wise words. So finally, we always ask all our guests, whether we're talking to our music guest or any other guest, if you're stuck in a lift and they said, well, it'll take about 2 or 3 hours, and we can put a movie on for you, what would you want to watch?
It will probably be Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins.
Have you seen that one?
It's been ranked one of the top.
Freeman, yes,
one of the top 5 movies
I absolutely love that movie.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's
I did not know that. Yeah. I absolutely love that movie.
Yeah, it on the
tale of someone overcoming.
Yes, yeah. On the IMDb, which rates movies.
So someone breaking out of prison.
Okay.
Someone breaking out of prison, someone being stuck in the lift, breaking out from the lift. Quite fitting.
Quite fitting, yeah. So the final part is that, okay, they're saying we're about to put on the movie for you, but we can play a song while the movie's about to be played. What song would you want to listen to?
I think it would have to be Christian. So it'd have to be You're the Solid Rock on Which I Stand by Ron Canoli.
Okay.
I don't know if you know that one.
No.
It's. I remember the first time my mum played that song for us. I think I was still a teenager, and I remember the words have impact. They have meaning, and the tune to it is so upbeat and uplifting. And when you listen to that song, you feel like you can do anything. So definitely that. Okay.
Well, I appreciate this is taking us through your life story, despite the third world connection. One would be shocked to find out you live in the southeast of England and you have this bad amount of Wi-Fi and stuff. But hey, but it was really fascinating. It was really good.
Indeed.
And it was also timely, as I said, with the events of recent stuff as well. But also, if you give me the details.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, if you give me the details of your website, your business stuff, so when we are pushing this out, then at least people can, if they want to know about the dresses and things, they can know where to how to get involved, how to get in touch as well.
Absolutely, will do. So it's obviously Bella Grace Event Dresses. Our website is www.b for ball, g for golf, eventsdresses.co.uk. But thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, Wi-Fi and all. But I will also put your link of your business stuff on as the videos go out as well, so they can be able to follow through and follow you on social media as well. Okay. Well, thanks again. It's been great.
Thank you. That's very much appreciated. Thank you so much.